right, so we're going to begin with our opening prayers. So we open up to page number 1, and these prayers are there for us to remember our motivation, what it is, why it is that we're attending these kinds of teachings, why it is that we're doing practices, why is it that we are studying, and so forth. So these motivations, these opening prayers are helping to set the intention for why we do this. And basically, it is for the benefit of the enlightenment of other beings. And we're not doing it selfishly for ourselves. We're doing it to help other beings, that whatever degree of enlightenment we may be able to cultivate, we dedicate for others, we do for the motivation of others. So we'll recite these prayers where it's indicated as 3 times. Tonight we'll say them in English. And so you can join along with us. You can please mute your microphone so we don't get feedback. But the idea is to do these out loud and together. So I'll lead this and just follow along, please. All mothers, sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and omniscience. May they experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly I will establish them in the state of unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. All mothers, sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and omniscience. May they experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly I will establish them in the state of unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. All mothers, sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and omniscience. May they experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly I will establish them in the state of unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. Next, we go to page 2, which is the action Bodhichitta prayer. We recite this 1 time. So Bodhichitta is the wholly enlightened mind. Bodhi means enlightenment, and Chitta means the heart mind. So this is the action of the wholly enlightened mind. So we repeat this 1 time. Thus, until I achieve enlightenment, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Until death, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. From now until this time tomorrow, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Next, we turn to page 5, which is the short refuge prayer. So we repeat this 3 times. We take refuge in the three jewels. We say the 3 jewels. The 3 jewels are the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. The Buddha means the mind of the Buddha, and the body is the physical body of the Buddha, is the Sangha, is the group of people, and the speech is the Dharma, the intellectualization of the Buddha. So these are what we call the 3 jewels. And when we do this, we are holding those 3 jewels in our hands at the heart like this. So we take our thumbs and we put those inside the palms of our hands to remind us of the 3 jewels. So we're holding these and we take refuge in the body, speech, and mind of the Buddha. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. Our last of the opening prayers is on page 6. And these are the 4 immeasurables. These are called the 4 vast immeasurable qualities of bodhicitta. So bodhicitta is the wholly enlightened mind. And all the enlightened ones, all these great beings, all share these same vast immeasurable qualities. The qualities are loving kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity. And equanimity means a sameness, a balance in all things. So these 4 vast immeasurable qualities are something that we have within ourselves, but maybe we haven't recognized them as they are. So now, by reciting this, it helps us to remember how important these 4 vast qualities are so that we can cultivate our recognition of these and be mindful of them all the time for the benefit of all other beings. So this first line, these lines need a little bit of explanation. So this first line, it says, may all mother sentient beings boundless as the sky. So we regard all beings as our mother. We would not want anything harmful to come to our mother. We would not want any suffering come to our mother. So we regard all beings as being our mother, that we would do everything we can to help our mother. And that our mother should have happiness and the causes of happiness. So the happiness and the causes of happiness is the loving kindness in the form of wisdom, that we understand that we have a knowledge of everyday life, but we also have a knowledge of our spirituality. And out of this, we're building our mindfulness of how things are operating, who we are as human beings, and how we can operate as with our true nature, with our bodhicitta. Then the next line is, may they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering, which means that beings do suffer and that we have compassion for those beings that suffer. We have compassion for ourselves if we suffer. We have compassion for our brothers and sisters and so on, but we're looking at all beings as being our mothers and having compassion for them. Then the next line is, may they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. So if we have happiness free from sorrow, that means that we have nothing but joy, just happiness and joy. So we are wishing that, we are remembering that for the sake of all beings. And then the last line is, may they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion, that they rest in the sense of sameness and the equality with no attachments and no aversions, no hatred, no desire. So this is very important as a quality of enlightenment, to be in that sense of sameness, that we are all together. There's no difference between me and other, you and other. So we recite this prayer with those 4 qualities in mind. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. And may they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. And may they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. So thank you. Those are our opening prayers for tonight. So thank you all for coming. This is the first night of our 8 sessions that we will have in this cycle of teaching Buddhism 101. And we repeat this over and over again, these cycles. This cycle, we're talking about our main book is going to be the Jewel Ornament of Liberation. And many of you may already have an outline book that I may have sent to you. If you don't have it and you want it, I can send it to you. Just let me know. And if you want to purchase the book, you can purchase the book at Amazon or other places. And it is like a college text. It has a lot of information in there. It is the manual on how to attain enlightenment. So it is a guidebook. And not only does it teach us how to go through all the progressive stages of enlightenment, but it also teaches us how to be enlightened. Once we are enlightened, how to sustain that enlightenment, how to lead an enlightened life. So it is a very important book. It is called a Lam Rim text, Lamrim. And Lam Rim is Tibetan and means stages of the path. So enlightenment is a progression that we go through from who we are as ordinary human beings, and that we go through being able to develop understanding of what it is to be a human being, not just as our physical body and our intellectual body, but also as our spiritual body, to understand what it is and learn our potentials as a human being. And as we are doing that, we are moving up closer and closer to what we might call enlightenment or Buddhahood. So tonight, what I wanted to do was to spend some time talking about the definition of some things. So each time we go through the Buddhism 101 teachings, we kind of approach it from a slightly different angle so that it keeps it fresh. We're not repeating the same words over and over all again in the same order, the same way and everything. We want to keep it interesting because a number of people here have been through the Buddhism 101 cycle of teachings, maybe 2 times, maybe 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, many times. I've been teaching this Buddhism 101 now for 16 years. I started teaching this in 2005 in Baltimore, and the different Dharma centers that I've been associated with, I've been given permission to be able to give these teachings on the fundamentals of Buddhist philosophy and meditation. So we're quite familiar with these ideas and so on. And the main point here again is that it is a progression and it is a repeatable process. So if we get interrupted, we know how to get back to where we were. And these fundamentals, you see, are repeated over and over again. So it's like a circle that keeps going around, and periodically we repeat the circle. We repeat these different teachings because they are fundamentals. And this is typical of the teachings that are done in Buddhism, that they are repeated over and over again. Over the course of a year, you might hear certain teachings 3 or 4 times, and then other teachings you may hear once every year, once every 2 years or 3 years. But there's these cycles, you see, of turning of the wheel of Dharma. So if everybody can turn their microphones off, I would appreciate it, so we're not getting feedback and not getting strange noises and so on. If anybody has any questions, I do not mind being interrupted. you can turn your microphone on and come in and just ask your question, or you can raise your hand with the Zoom feature here, and try and see everybody on the screen, and I'll certainly ask you to pose your question. But I don't mind being interrupted, so you can ask your questions anytime. So I think everybody is interested in Buddhism, or they're interested in meditation, or they're interested in being able to have a happier lifestyle, have a happier life with everyday things that they do. So Buddhism helps us to do that. Buddhism helps us to recognize that we are responsible for our happiness, and we're responsible for our suffering, and anything in between that. There's nothing out there that is controlling us. The only thing that's controlling us is within ourselves. There may be external forces, external input coming to us, but it's the way in which we react to that external forces is what makes us happy or what makes us suffer. So we need to be able to process those inputs coming in and be able to neutralize or be able to transform them into a balanced way of living, and to make ourselves happy and to have that sense of responsibility. So this is a theme that we talk about over and over again. We come back over this many times. So maybe you want to take notes, but we do repeat things an awful lot, and that is part of the process that we go through. So many people over the years have asked about, well, what is enlightenment? How do you do, what does that mean? What is enlightenment? How can I be enlightened? And will I recognize enlightenment? And so what is it? So I've got a number of books here, and I happened to come across this particular book called Vajra Speech. Vajra is a Sanskrit word that means indestructible. So this indestructible speech of the enlightened ones, of the Buddhas and so on. And this has been written by a great teacher. His name was Tulku Orgen Rinpoche, who has passed. And he passed a number of years ago. But his teachings are really great. And this book is like a dictionary or a little bit of an encyclopedia that has certain words in there that are very, very useful for us. So I thought that it would be good to begin by each session by choosing a word and giving the point of view that Rinpoche has on this particular word, and it may shine some light on some of the abstractness of what some of the academics of Buddhism might present to us in the beginning when we're first learning about it. So enlightenment, the first definition he gives, is the enlightened state of a Buddha who perceives everything in all directions at the same moment and in a completely unobstructed fashion. The Dharma teachings are an expression arising from this state and are totally free from any falsehood or pretense. So what does that mean? What is a Buddha? So Buddha is a Sanskrit word that means the awakened one. And that we have that potential of being Buddha all within ourselves. Each one of us has that Buddha potential, has that Buddha nature within ourselves. The historical Buddha, who lived 2,600 years ago, realized this. This was part of his teachings. And his teachings are called the Dharma with a capital D. And the Dharma means a pathway. So there's many different pathways to many different jobs and things that we do. And they're called dharmas, and they would have a small case D. But a capital D would be the Dharma of the Buddha, the teachings of the Buddha, the intellectualization of what the Buddha realized through his process of becoming enlightened. So one of the first things he taught was that we all have this potential within us. We all have Buddha nature within ourselves. So as we begin to realize that, and we begin to stabilize that in our everyday lives and so on, we begin to speak in terms of the Dharma. We begin to use these words that, one word may translate as a paragraph or two paragraphs or a page in the English language. But so understanding these words becomes rather important for us to be able to understand very simply what is being taught to us through the academics of what Buddhism is. So Buddhism is this Dharma teaching. So it says here that the Buddha perceives all things, realizes all things that, may seem to be a mystery to us. The Buddha realizes all that because the Buddha is awakened and understands what all these different things are. And we talk a lot about this as we go along. So we're going to come back to that many times. And all these things that the reasons why we don't understand these things or we don't recognize these things are, we say, are obscurations, are blockages that prevent us from being able to recognize what the truth of these things are, what the true nature of these things are. So one illustration of this is that in our heart center, we have this indestructible true nature, like a diamond. And this diamond is made up of the wholly enlightened mind. This is the big mind. This is the little mind, the intellect. And the intellect blocks up this mind that's in our heart center. So our first job is to begin to remove those blockages, remove those obstructions of our confused thoughts, of our emotions, so that we can reveal our true nature, this Buddha indestructible diamond nature that we have within ourselves. Now, this indestructible nature, this true nature, is not something that is unique to Buddhism. It's not exclusive. Buddhism is a way to be able to understand this true nature that all beings have. All beings have this. And there's many different ways to be able to explain this. Christianity is one way. The Christ is one way of understanding this true nature. In Judaism, they talk about a true nature. In Hinduism, they talk about a true nature. In Islam, they talk about a true nature. So in many of the great traditions of the world, through all history and so on, there have been these great teachings, and they are still being taught in certain places and so on. The Buddha discovered his path to enlightenment, to these realization of this true nature 2,600 years ago. And his genius was to be able to give a way to be able to show people how he attained that recognition, that realization, that enlightenment of the true nature that we all have. So that's what the Dharma teachings are, is an explanation of how to follow to get to that point of realizing it for ourselves. So we can't give anybody enlightenment. There's no quick way to say, here, you do this and you will be enlightened just like that. It doesn't work that way. You have to go through the process of removing all your own blockages, all your own obstructions, all your own sufferings, all your own emotions, and so on. So the Dharma is filled with all these pieces of information of what these things are and how we use them. So the Dharma is a body of teachings of what it is, and we learn why it has developed the way it has, and then we learn also how it is that we work with these things. So there's a what, there's a why, and there's a how to everything that we are examining. So the academics are like a what these things are. Along with the academics, we want to learn why these things happen. And then in the how is how it is that we take this wisdom and through our compassion, through our skillful means, that we're applying the teachings to be able to liberate ourselves from whatever confusion, whatever emotions, and so on that we have. So again, you may be hearing these things for the first time. You may have heard them many times before, but I think that with each time that we hear these, because we repeat these, they become clearer and clearer. We begin to see how these things work and so on. So if you're hearing it for the first time, it may seem a little bit esoteric. It may seem a little bit abstract, but it's something new. We're using new vocabulary words. We're trying to define things for you, and you're going to build up this new vocabulary to be able to use in your life and so on, and to be able to recognize this true nature that we have that has been suppressed, that has been blocked up. So this was a description of enlightenment, was saying that this was the Dharma teachings are an expression arising from the state of being aware, being awakened of all these things, and are totally free from any falsehood or pretense. So it's like the naked truth. So a second definition here that Rinpoche uses, it says, we are taught that we can achieve enlightenment by practicing the Dharma, engaging in virtue, and avoiding non-virtue. This is because we have the potential, because our nature is potentially the state of enlightenment. It's like a gold lodestone, which has the potential to yield gold when it has been smelted. But a piece of wood does not have it because it does not have the nature of gold. We have the capacity for enlightenment because our nature is the enlightened essence. So this is important to recognize. We have this Buddha nature. We have enlightenment within us. And so we need to be able to recognize that we are worthy vessels, that we are worthy people that need to be purified. Our confusions need to be purified so that we can recognize the truth of our virtue. Our virtue. So it's important to recognize that we have virtue and that we have non-virtue. Non-virtue is all the confusions, all the negative things that we do, the unwholesomeness things that we do, the emotions come from non-virtue. Non-virtue might be expressed in terms of ignorance, might be expressed in terms of desire, might be expressed in terms of hatred, of jealousy, and of greediness. And the way that those 5 things work together make up all these different emotions that we have and so on, that all have their root in this non-virtue. So we are dualistic beings. that we see things and we compare things, say, well, this is good and this is bad. This is virtue and this is non-virtue. This is up and this is down. We're always using opposites to be able to understand our brain working in these ways, to be able to understand what's going on within ourselves and outside of ourselves. So we need to be able to rise above that dualism. And the Dharma gives us a pathway to be able to do that. It's not easy to do. We need to be able to get objective, to be able to stand back from our everyday thoughts. And as we do that, we develop the techniques of contemplation, of thinking, what we call one-pointed mindfulness. And this is what leads us to meditation. So meditation is an integral part of this being able to transcend ourselves into pure virtue, to be able to rise above our dualistic nature. So as he was saying here, it's kind of like that we have this lodestone, that we have this rock that we found in the ground, and it's all covered in mud. And not everybody's going to recognize that as being gold. But somebody might recognize that and say, oh, we'll wash that off. And you begin to see that there's something else besides the mud there. And then you say, oh, well, you know, this is a lodestone of gold. If you melt it, if you put it in a pot, put it in a fire, then the slag, all the impurities are going to rise up from the top, and we can sweep that away. And then what's left is the pure gold. So we each have that pure gold within ourselves. We're not a piece of wood. We're a piece of gold, figuratively. That we have that nature. We have the nature of enlightenment within us. We all have goodness within ourselves. What happened when we were born is we were born completely good, completely pure, completely unable to be able to do anything for ourselves. So all the input that came to us as an infant came to us from our parents, came to us from our brothers and sisters and from our families and so on, and then came to us from other kids and when we went to school and so on. And so all the non-virtues, all the negativities, all the confusions, all the emotions that came from our families, that came from our peers, that came from our schools and so on, all came to us and became embedded within us. And this is how we developed all these confusions that have led us to want to be able to understand, where's our gold? Where is that gold? Why don't we recognize that? We were born with this gold. How can we get back to it? So that's what we're trying to do. So this enlightenment is the realization that we have this goodness and that we want to live this goodness, and that there is a pathway to be able to do that. There are many pathways. Buddhism is just one of many. And we can compare them. They're all very, very good. The Buddhism is very, has a great deal of scripture, has a great deal of writings about it, has a great many teachers. And they talk about it in a very clear and straightforward way. We try and remove the mysteries. We can't do it all at once. You know, it would be great if we could, but we can't. It's got to be done in increments. So it's a progressive path. So there, we need to have a bit of a commitment to the process to allow the teachings to come to us, to allow us to contemplate the meaning of them, and then to apply them to ourselves, and then to remove the blockages of that gold nature, that diamond nature that we talk about. So I hope I haven't lost anybody. Anybody have any questions or comments? Okay. So then there is we need to understand that many people want to be on some kind of a path. Some people don't care about a path. Some people don't think that there is a path. Some people think that there might be a path, but they're a little bit dubious about how to get there, or they're dubious about trusting in other people that are speaking about this path and how to apply what it is that they are telling us to be able to get onto this path. There are people who are on this path, who choose to join the path, but are doing it out of fear. They're fearing that if they don't do it, they're going to lose out on something. They sense that there's something there. They may not understand it, but at the same time, they're afraid that if they don't pay attention, they're going to lose out and they're going to be left alone. There are those who are on the path and have realized things on the path, have realized light, if you will, wisdom, skillful means, of the ability, some compassion about it, but they're selfish about it. They keep it to themselves. They don't want to share it with other beings. And then there are some people who are clearly on the path, who have had great results, and who become like a luminosity of that awareness, of those realizations. They become radiant. They begin to exude that loving kindness, that bodhichitta, that compassion, that joy, and that equanimity for all to share in, for all to enjoy together, and so on. They become a person of the community that shares equally with all beings. So these are expressed as the 5 families of the Buddha, and the Buddha being the awakened one. So there's those who say, oh, it doesn't exist. You know, if I can't see it, if I can't weigh it, if I can't hold it, it doesn't exist. And they have no sense of any kind of spirituality at all. These people are called disconnected people. They're disconnected from spirituality. Then there are those who are dubious, those who say, well, I'd like to think that there is something, but I don't know. And you know what? I just can't trust anything that I hear about it. I'd like to know that there's spirituality. I'd like to know that there's something there, but I just can't trust it. I just can't allow myself to do that. So there's a lot of people like that. And maybe we've gone through periods like this ourselves, where we didn't believe that there was anything there beyond what we could see or feel. There wasn't anything beyond the intellectual or the physical, only those 2 bodies. Or maybe there was a time, or maybe it's now, that you see, well, I'm dubious about this. I'm interested in finding out what it is, but I really don't trust what's being said. I really don't trust what's going on. So I'm dubiously looking at this, but I'm just as apt to shut it down as I can anything else. Or maybe the next one is that we become what we call a hearer. I'm listening to it. I'm paying attention to it. I'm trying to process it. But my motivation is that I'm afraid if I don't understand this, I might miss something and I'm going to wind up worse than I was. So we're doing this, we're listening to this out of a fear of not being able to move forward. That's our motivation, is our fear. Understanding about this They recognize that there is something to this, but they selfishly hold on to it because they have a strong ego. And the ego is taking this and saying, oh, you achieve this, and this makes you better than other people. And people may look to you as being someone important because you know these things and they don't. So they're going to look for you. So these people are called solitary realizers because they try and be by themselves. Their motivation was fear that if they didn't do these things, they would be left alone. But now they're making themselves be alone because they don't want to share what they've learned. They're egocentric beings. They're very arrogant beings. So maybe you know somebody like that. Maybe you've had these kinds of experiences and thoughts yourself. But then maybe there are beings who have had those things, have experienced all those 4 things that we just talked about, but now there is a clarity in what they have recognized. They've had some realization this spirituality is really true. There really is something there. There really is this virtue. There really is this loving kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity. And I have to share it. I can't keep it for myself. I have to share it because its only real value is when everyone is enjoying this together. And it's not an easy thing to do. But nevertheless, no matter what the difficulty is, I will bear up to that difficulty to be able to maintain that joy, to be able to maintain that sense of balance, that sense of sameness with all beings and so on. So this is being on the path. That is being on the path of being a spiritual person. And it happens in increments, like I said, a little bit at a time. And as we build up, it gets stronger and stronger and stronger. So I would like to think that all of us at this point are somewhere on that spectrum. And maybe that we have made it to the point where, we do realize that there is this spirituality. And I do realize that I would want to be able to make this stable in my life. And there's different ways of approaching this. But I'm curious about what this Buddhism is about, because it teaches more than what I was learning from the tradition maybe that I grew up in, or something that I was exposed to in school, or something that I've spent some time reading about. But this Buddhism has a great deal more, at least right now, to offer me to be able to understand how to navigate my way through all of this.
Lance, these categories, I can recognize all of them. I can, to some extent, identify with all of them, but they're not mutually exclusive, are they? And they're not necessarily stable. In other words, at any given time, I can be in a combination of them, or I could slip back into one that I think I've gotten beyond, or.
That's correct.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's a process. And yes, as you say, you can slip back. Say you may go through, the teachings and for a period of time, and then you take a vacation. And when you take your vacation, you're going out, you're having fun, you're doing things, you begin doing some non-virtuous things, some unwholesome things, and that which you learned begins to fade away. But then at some point, so you're like going back to where you were. But then you say, oh, I've had enough of this. I want to get back to where I was before, when I was learning all this. So you kind of got to start over again and build back up and build up the clarity and so on of where it was that you were before. So that's why it's a repeatable system to be able to do that. So yeah, so does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
So we may all have been exposed to this. Like I said, you may have experienced this with other traditions and so on. And in the Buddhism, like I said, there's a lots of information there to be able to help us to understand this and to be able to intellectualize this. Because first we have to apply some logic to this. We have to understand how all this works. You know, we're rational beings and we have to rationalize why we're doing all this. So it's important to do that. So in order to do that, there's a series of prayers that we use, and many of you are going to have this in front of you because you've either been in this class before or that I recently sent it to you. And if you don't have it, I'm going to let me know and I will send it to you. It's called The Four Thoughts That Turn the Mind to the Dharma. So why is it that here there's a collection of, I don't know how many people are here, 12 or so people that are here right now. What has been special about each of us that has caused us, that was the motivation, pardon me, that was the motivation for us to be here now, to be listening to this stuff? What are these thoughts that turn us to the Dharma? Why is it that we wanted to look at this? And this is very interesting. This is something that the practitioners, Buddhist practitioners, recite this every day because it helps to stabilize. Like Ed was saying, you know, this is a system that you can be moving through at any given time. And like I said, you can take a vacation and kind of move backward and you got to come back. So this prayer recited every day helps you to keep your wheels on the track, so to speak. So if you have this, we're going to turn to page 1, and this is called A Precious Human Life. The thought that turns our life, the thought that turns our mind to the Dharma is, you know what? I realize that I've got a human life, but more than that, this life is really different than a lot of other human beings. There's what, 7.5 billion people that live on this planet right now? And how many of those people are in great suffering? How many of those people are in war zones? How many of those people from day to day don't know whether they're going to be able to get enough food for themselves and their families? How many people are locked in disease and don't know whether they're going to be able to heal themselves from whatever their disease is or some kind of injury? Most of the people of those 7.5 billion people fall into one or more of those categories. And there's no time for them. There's no opportunity for those beings to be able to recognize that they are a human being, much less some kind of a special, a precious human being who has the ability, who has that gold, who has that diamond nature within themselves, but they want to be on a path to be able to recognize that. So out of the 7.5 billion people, whatever fraction it is of people who are on that path is very, 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 very small. How many people have there been on the planet altogether? If there's 7.5 billion right now, how many have been here through all of antiquity? Well, we don't know it. Gazillion. Who knows how many people have actually been here? But how many people could you say we can trace these spiritual people? We know that they're there. We've read great books about, you know, these spiritual people and so on, but what made them special and so on? Why did they have this? So for us, it's an important question. and something that has an answer, something that we say that this precious human life. So if you've got this text on page 1, it says the freedoms and advantages so extremely difficult to obtain accomplish the purpose of human life. If one does not achieve benefit from this now, how could this opportunity come again? So we recognize that there is something that we have special. We're very fortunate. We live in a fortunate land. We live in a land that is free. We live in a land where we can get as much education as we want, as we can. There are limits to this. We got to see that, things are, not completely perfect that we would like them to be. But generally speaking, we're not living in lands where we're in a war. We're not living in lands where we are dying of famine, and we're not living in lives where we're dying of disease, although we can see that some of this stuff is creeping into our land here, and we're very fortunate. Not that this land here, and I'm, to give it a name, America, but, these American qualities, are in other parts of the world. It's not exclusive to America. But the point is that we have gotten to a point where, we're intelligent people, we're relatively healthy people, we're able to take care of ourselves and our families, so we can consider ourselves to have precious human lives. So now the question is, what are we going to do with it? What do we do? How will this opportunity come to us again? Do we need to be able to seize this and say, well, okay, I've gotten to this level of education, I've gotten to this level of achievement with my job, with my family. Is there something beyond the physical, something beyond the intellectual? Is there something spiritual now that I can spend time with? So one of the qualities of having a precious human life is that we have leisures, that we have the ability, the wherewithal to be able to spend time seeking spirituality and understanding spirituality, not just in Buddhism, but in Christianity or Judaism or Hinduism or Islam, whatever path we wish to follow. Do we want to be a scientist? What kind of scientist? There's so many different choices we have. And so to be able to raise our understanding of things. So this quality, this precious human life, is something that now we're using that to say, well, what is this Dharma? What does that mean? What is Buddha? What does that mean? What does this enlightenment mean? Maybe I should investigate this. It's said that for the analogy or a metaphor for being a precious human being is more rare than a blind turtle who is at the bottom of a great ocean, bigger than all the oceans that we know of on this planet. And this blind turtle, once every 100 years, swims up through the water, gets to the surface of the water, and there is a yoke that is floating on the water like a life raft, a yoke, and the blind turtle pokes his head right through the yoke. That's how difficult it is to have this precious human life. Out of all the 7.5 billion people, such a small number, but yet we have this ability. Everybody here tonight has this ability, and maybe you recognize it, maybe you don't. But now hearing about it should give you cause to say, you know what, I do have this precious human life. I took it for granted. I didn't realize how fortunate I am and how fortunate these people are here who are with me, and maybe my family and other people that I know who maybe need to hear these things. So this becomes a motivation for us to learn the Dharma, the Buddha's Dharma, to stay with the Dharma, to understand this true nature. So that's one. The second one, if we can turn the page to impermanence. Impermanence means that death is something that is going to happen to us all. Change is something that happens to us all. And because this change, because of this impermanence, you mean I'm not going to live forever? You mean, what is permanence? Well, everything is impermanent. Not anything, nothing is permanent that we know in this physical nature that we see around ourselves. So this can be a motivation for us to understand the Dharma, because the Dharma takes us into account, takes into account impermanence, and becomes a motivation for us. So I'm going to read this prayer here that starts on page 2 and page 3. It says ka. Ka means like attention. No matter what has been done, nothing benefits at the time of death. Worldly activities, yes, they are lies. Ka, the 8 worldly dharmas are like a painted rainbow. Think you can put your trust in them? What are the 8 worldly concerns? What are the 8 worldly dharmas? What do we think about all the time? Remember I said dharmas are like a pathway, and there's many different pathways, lowercase d. What are these different dharmas? So what do we think about all the time? We think about gain and loss. We think about pleasure and pain. We think about praise and blame. And we think about fame and disgrace. And if you sit back and you contemplate this, you know, part of Buddhism, part of doing this is being reflective on what these things mean, giving yourself some space and time, a time out to be able to contemplate these ideas for ourselves. Everything is not perfectly explained in these papers. We need to be able to understand it ourselves. So these 8 things here, these 8 worldly concerns, gain and loss. How much are we thinking about how much we have in the bank? And wow, I'm getting close to retirement, or I have retired, and every day I'm looking at the stock reports or my bank account to make sure that I haven't lost money, that I'm going to run out and I'm not going to be able to retire, or I'm going to have an unhappy retirement because I don't have enough money. Or maybe that I'm saving up to buy a new house. I'm much younger. I got a young family. I'm saving up for a new house, or I'm saving up for a car or something like that. How much I need to gain, how much of that is my motivation, and then how much is my motivation to not want to lose it. And I'm so worried I'm going to lose it. You know, am I going to hide it someplace in the house? Am I going to put it in a bank account? Is the bank account insured? Am I going to put it in the stock market? Are they good stocks? Can I trust my stockbroker? All these things come into our minds. And how many times during the day do we think about gain and loss, about material things, about positions that we might have in our work and our families? How much time do we think about that? Pleasure and pain. Pleasure, the pleasure that we get from our families, the pleasures that we get from our loved ones. How much time do we think about pleasure? Whether it's sexual pleasure, or it's the pleasure of the company of having dinner with our families and our friends and so on. How much time do we think about the pleasure of preparing a beautiful meal and having all these things, you know, in our home that's going to make everybody feel comfortable and so on like that, because you can have these moments of pleasure at the end of the day after working and so on. But then something can happen and you lose that. Maybe there could be a spark of fire that comes out of your fireplace and it burns a big hole in your carpet that you just put down or something. And now that pleasure that you had, that carpet now becomes a great pain to you. Now I got to deal with that. I got to deal with the insurance company. I got to get it replaced. I got to do all these things. Maybe it's your car. You just got a brand new car and you're so happy. You're so beautiful. It brings you so much pleasure. You love driving down the road. You go to the supermarket and you come back out and you see that somebody's taken a shopping cart and has rammed it into the driver's door. Now you got a big scratch and a ding in the side of your car. And now that car that was giving you such pleasure is now nothing but pain. Now I got to deal with the insurance company. I got to deal with the deductible. I got to go get it fixed. I got to do all these things. Now it's a pain to me. How much time do we think about pleasure and pain? And then praise and blame. You know, you're in work or in your family, and you meet someone who is a really nice mate for you, and you bring them home to you, to your family. You want them to meet your new lover and how wonderful this is and how happy and everything, and everybody's thrilled that you're doing this and so on. Or you at work and you've got a nice job, but you know, and let's say that you bring in a new account, and that new account brings in, you know, $1 million into the business, and everybody's so happy. The boss says to you, "Oh, this is so great. You know, I didn't know how I was going to make payroll for the next month. Now we have this new account. This is wonderful. This is great. Thank you very much." And everybody's giving you all this praise for doing all this. But then the next day, the phone rings and it's another customer who says, "I'm sorry, I've decided to go take my business to someplace else." Or your lover that you brought to the house says, "You know what, after meeting your family, I think I'm going to find another soulmate. You're not meeting up to the standards that I want." So now all that praise that you were getting from your family, all that praise that you were getting from work now becomes blame. "Oh, you're losing this big account. Oh, we're not going to have that great wedding. Oh, gee, you caused all this problem for us." So praise and blame. How much time do we think about praise and blame? And then the last one is fame and disgrace. Not all of us may have a lot of fame, but maybe we have heroes, and maybe they're sports heroes, or maybe they're political heroes, or maybe they're military heroes, or they're professional heroes of doctors or lawyers, people that we look up to, and they're very famous, and we think they're so wonderful, how great they are, and people flock to see them and get their autographs and maybe get their picture taken with them, and how wonderful it is, these people, and you listen for everything that they say, "Oh, because so-and-so said this, and he likes this brand of whatever it is, and I'm going to buy it because he told me to buy it." And I just, his fame just overwhelms me. I just love it. But then you find out that he has some kind of a skeleton in the closet. Maybe he's a child abuser, or maybe he beats up his wife, or maybe he's an embezzler, he does something else. So all that fame now turns into disgrace. So how much time do we think about that? So by sitting down and thinking about these things and considering these things, you find out that a lot of your time is spent on these 8 dharmas, these 8 worldly concerns. How much time are you thinking about your spirituality? How much time are you thinking about the connection between your brothers and your sisters and you and all other beings? How much time are you thinking about love? How much time are you thinking about compassion? Maybe an hour or 2 a week. Maybe you tune into a teaching like this, or you do a practice, you know, something like this, or you go to church and you hear the leader of the church talk about these things for an hour or 2, and that's it. Then you're back to the 8 worldly concerns. So this impermanence goes to this idea that we are looking at things that are impermanent. How impermanent is gain and loss? How impermanent is praise and blame? How impermanent is pleasure and pain? How impermanent is fame and disgrace? They're very impermanent. They don't stay. You know, one hero one day all of a sudden becomes a bum the next day. You find out that he embezzled, $84 million or something from people, taking their retirement accounts with them and so on. And so these things are all impermanent. So it says now, continuing with this prayer, it says, in the certainty of death and knowing that nothing remains long, quickly accomplish liberation. Impermanence makes departure certain, like the shadow of the setting sun. So liberation from what? Liberation from the attachment to all these things, to thinking that these things are all permanent, to be self-identifying with these things, that my ego gets all tied up in my gain and loss, my pleasure and pain, these 8 worldly concerns. My ego gets tied up in that. And to be liberated from that, to be free from that, to have just peace of mind, to not have to think about that. And spirituality is what brings that to us. The essence of spirituality is that interconnectedness of this love, of this compassion, of this joy, of this equanimity, this vibration that runs through all of us. So we say we abandon laziness and indifference, and we blaze like fire and fierce diligence. Instead of blazing with this great fire for our jobs and for our family and for these things that are impermanent, instead we begin to blaze with our spirituality. We begin to radiate light. Our peacefulness begins to radiate. Our happiness, our joyfulness becomes something that you can feel. When you meet somebody who is a spiritual person like this, in their presence, it just kind of naturally overwhelms you in a very pleasant way. You just like being with that person. Can you imagine being with the Pope or the Dalai Lama or Gandhi or whomever, these great spiritual beings were, that being in their presence just makes you feel good because they are radiating this goodness in everything that they say and do. So they are liberated, we say. So it says that we are abandoning laziness, indifference, blaze and fire and fierce diligence. This life is impermanent, like clouds in the autumn sky. Birth and death migrators are the same as actors in a play or performance. The life of beings is like lightning in the sky, like water falling from a steep mountain cliff. It departs quickly, quickly. When we think about it, how long does our life last? How long have human beings been in creation? If you've read or heard any of these stories, that the solar system or the universe has been around for billions and billions and billions of years, but the lifetime of human beings has been like a finger click in the space of all that time that all this creation has been. For us, these 50, 60, 70, 80 years seem like a long time, but when you think about it in the space, it's just like a click of the fingers. It's just gone before you know it. So, and we attach to the permanence of this. Oh, when we're young, we think, oh, I'm not going to die. I can do all these things without worrying. I'm not going to die. But then as we get older, we start looking and say, well, maybe I got 5 years left. Maybe I've got 3 years left. Maybe I got 10 years left. How much time do I have left? We begin to recognize our impermanence more and more and more that turns us to the Dharma. How does the Dharma explain this temporalness, this temporariness of life, of being a human being? And where do I find comfort in that? Where do I find understanding in that? So the Dharma offers an understanding, a piece of what that is, of what this temporary nature, this indestructible true nature that we have in our heart center, this spirituality is that. And being able to recognize that, to be able to see that we are part of this continuum. And this becomes a great comfort to us. That we're not tied into this one lifetime and think that, oh, if I didn't accomplish this, if I didn't accomplish that, and so on, my life was a failure. Or because I did accomplish this, because I did accomplish that, that now my life is so great, that I'm better than other beings, and so on. Anybody have any questions or comments? So then we go to the next part here, page 4. So we call this life the ocean of suffering. That no matter what we do, are these 8 worldly concerns that describe, that are the experience of this ocean of suffering. That this everything may seem nice, but things change. You know, with pleasure and pain, you know, here I am, I'm born, you know, and I grow up, I'm 19 years old, 20 years old, and things are great. Man, I got my car, I can go out, I've got a girlfriend, a couple girlfriends, I'm a girl, I got a couple boyfriends, things are good, I'm doing well in school, I got a part-time job, all these things are good, you know, but then all of a sudden something happens and things change, and now all that goodness turns into suffering. So the ocean of suffering is like that. There are things that are beautiful. There are things that are great, but they all change. It all morphs into something else. We have this great body, but then as we get older, this great body begins to get sick. We begin to not heal as quickly. We can't think as fast. Our hair turns color. We can't see as good. We got to wear stronger glasses and so on. And if I do exercise, it hurts all day long because I did some exercise. Where when I did these things when I was young, I could do all these things and nothing bothered me. Now all of a sudden I feel everything. I'm feeling my age and so on. So this suffering of samsara is the name that we give to this. We call this samsara, this ocean of suffering. So this ocean of suffering, we can rise above this ocean of suffering. The ocean of suffering is where all the emotions are, all the confusions, all the hatred, all the delusion, all the desire, all the greediness, the pridefulness, the jealousies, all that are there, all these emotions. But as a human being, we can liberate from that and we can rise ourselves above this ocean of suffering into what we call nirvana. And this nirvana is like above the water, above the ocean. It's up in the atmosphere. And it's free of all the attachments and the aversions. All those things are still there. We may be in nirvana, but we can fall backward. We can fall back into samsara. We can attain a clarity of mind. We can attain a peacefulness a happiness, but something can happen. We get sick, someone passes away in our family, we lose money, we lose possessions or something, and now we just fall right back into the ocean of suffering. It's part of our dualistic nature. So this suffering of samsara becomes a cause for us to seek the Dharma, the Buddha Dharma, to understand what is going on here. Why do we have this? Why is there this suffering? And what is this nirvana? As temporary as it may be, when I'm there, everything is great. Why can't it stay that way? So we say here in this prayer on page 4, on the first line, it says, consider the suffering of beings in the 6 realms of samsara. Doing so, great fear and dread arise in the heart. So these 6 realms, as human beings, we are caught in a psychophysical drama of being a human being. These are called the 6 realms of being a human being. So we talk a lot about this as we go on. So I'm not going to dwell on it a lot, but I am going to introduce it to you. So at the very top of this is the God realm. Have you ever thought that maybe we're like gods, that you are like a god, or that you would like to be like a god? What it is to be like a god? Those who have no suffering and can just be delighted with everything that is happening and no worries. Everything is just beautiful. Everything is peaceful. Everything is sublime. And then some of us, we're like demigods. The demigods are jealous gods. These gods are jealous of the gods. They want to be like the gods, but they are in conflict. These jealous gods are in conflict with each other. Many of these jealous gods might be explained as being political people. They might be military people. They might be financiers, finance people. People who have great ability, great skillful means to convince people to give them possessions and to give them power with the expectation that those jealous gods are going to do something for those people. But those jealous gods are taking that for their own aggrandizement, for their own benefit. They're using those other people that are giving them this power. And these jealous gods are fighting among themselves because now they want what the other jealous god has. Oh, you've got $5 billion. I've only got $3 billion. I want your $5 million. And then once you get that, then you want the next guy's $1 billion and so on. So they're jealous of each other and in conflict with each other. Have you ever thought that maybe you're caught in some kind of a psychophysical drama where you're always in conflict with other beings or within yourself? And then there's being a human being. Being a human being means to be in the midst of change all the time. Maybe that's a good thing. Being a human being is something that is very good, to be a human being. But to be a human being that is a complete human being, that is not just a physical human being, not just an intellectual human being, but also a spiritual human being. So I'm going to come back to that. Those are called the 3 higher realms: the God realm, the demigod realm, or the jealous God realm, and the human realm. Then the 3 lower realms are the animal realm, the animals who are ignorant, who can't take care of themselves. They have some minor skills. They have some emotions. They have love for their infants and so on like that. They raise their infants and they do that. There's many great skills that they have and so on, but they're unable to change their environment like humans can. They can't build a house or something. You know, they can't recognize themselves. They're constantly in search of food. They're constantly trying to procreate. They're looking to eat, and they're trying to protect themselves from being eaten by some other animal. So they're in a constant state of having to survive. So animal. But can you think of a human being living a very animalistic kind of a life? Maybe you've experienced that yourself, where you know other people like that. I know I certainly have when I was much younger, you know, and the things that you think about when you're much younger, it's like having a noose or a ring through your nose, and you're being pulled in all different directions like an animal by your desires and by your hatred and by your delusions and so on. You're being pulled around like an ignorant animal. And then there's a realm called the hungry ghost realm. These hungry ghosts are beings who are never satisfied. They're insatiable. And because of that insatiability, they are miserable. They're very fat, very round, and they got short legs and they got short arms, but they got long, thin necks and a very small mouth. So they can never drink enough water. They can never eat enough food to satisfy their big, rotund appetites. So maybe it's food, maybe it's water, but maybe it's their position at work. Maybe it's their family relationships. Maybe it's their interests, their interests in gaining knowledge. They're insatiable, and they're always miserable. They're always unhappy people because they can never satisfy themselves. So maybe you've been like that yourself, or you know people like that. And then last is the hell realms. In these hell realms, beings are there who are constantly suffering, unbearable suffering of birth and death. Why? Because they did great, terrible things when they were alive. Now they are in these hell realms, and they're in these hot hells or these cold hells that are constantly being reprisals for the things that they have done before. And they're caught in these realms where, say, for instance, say they killed somebody, and say they killed somebody with a knife. And so these beings are in the hell realm, and they're constantly falling onto a sword that goes in through their body and kills them a terrible death. And then they immediately are revived, only the next moment to fall on the sword again and die over and be reborn over and die over and over and over and over again. There are beings who might be in the cold hells, who are caught between two glaciers, and the two glaciers are grinding together, and you're caught in between these two glaciers in these cold hells because of terrible things of crushing, that maybe those beings crush beings in some way, maybe, you know, walking along on the pavement and with joy kicking dogs or cats and crushing them with your car, or crushing insects on the pavement or something like that. So they're reborn into these hell realms and going through these death and birth over and over and over again. So this is, of course, can be a figurative thing. It doesn't have to be a literal place like this. So each of these places are metaphor for the psychophysical drama that human beings go through. Some thinking they're gods, some thinking they're great financiers, they're great politicians, and they're just using people for their own self-aggrandizement, where they're animals just living, and not caring about, what their homes are like. They live like pigs, they live like animals, and just taking advantage of people and things wherever they can. And hungry ghosts who are miserable no matter what they have, they're never satisfied. And then those who are constantly dying in war zones or whatever because of the terrible things that they've done, who always are making bad decisions in their lives. Some people just can't seem to get out of their own way. They're always making bad decisions. So all this is within the human being, all within the human realm. That's constantly going through changes. So this is the ocean of suffering. And we recognize that we're responsible for our place in this. These 6 realms are dynamic in that one day we might be 10% this, 5% that, 50% this, 20% that. We're in a constant state of flux, and over a period of time, those percentages change as our lives change and so on. But this is the ocean of suffering. So whatever our age is now, but looking at your life, you can see that you've gone through changes. So recognizing that this is the ocean of suffering, you say to yourself, my goodness, how do I navigate this? How do I understand this? How do they do it? How does the Buddha do it? Let me understand what the Buddha does. And so we seek the Buddha Dharma to understand a clear pathway to be able to navigate through these 6 realms of the psychophysical drama of being a human being. What does it mean being a spiritual being? How does being a spiritual being help us in every one of those realms? So then the last of the 4 thoughts that turn the mind to the Dharma is karma, cause, and result. Karma is a Sanskrit word that means action. And for every action, there needs to be a cause. And the cause is a thought. Something happens to us, and then it gives us cause to think about it, and then the potential to make an action. Maybe it's a equal but opposite action. Maybe it's an action to withdraw. Maybe it's an action to neutralize. But there's an action. And then there's a result from that action. So this is karma, cause, and result, action. How did we get into these 6 psychophysical dramas? We got into those 6 dramas through our karma, because there is this reciprocity, this law of karma that says that what you do is going to come back to you. It's an invisible law. A lot of people say, oh, that doesn't exist because I can't measure it. I can't weigh it. I can't hold it in my hands. I can't see it. It doesn't exist. But what about gravity? What about electromagnetics? What about the weak force and the strong force of atomic energy? What about those things? The scientists have been able to prove that, through physics and so on. But the spiritual law of karma is much more subtle. But yet, if we think about our lives and we think about the changes that we've gone through, and we think about things that we maybe have solved in our life, problems that we have solved, but then also think about the problems that we haven't solved and that they come back to us every few years. Or you see other people Maybe it's easier to see it in other people. They keep on making the same mistakes over and over and over again. And you say to yourself, why do they do it? They keep on doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. If they would just change this attitude, if they would change the way in which they look at this, they will have a much better result than the one that they keep having. So there's this law of reciprocity, the golden rule. What you do is going to come back on you. Do unto your brother as you would have them do unto you. All these things like that. That there is this dynamic that is happening, that we are part of, that is a function of our spirituality. So I've used this analogy many times, that we have a physical body, we have an intellectual body, we have a spiritual body. So if we have our physical body and our intellectual body, that's like two legs of a stool. And in most people, that's all they know. That's all they care about, their physical body and their intellectual body. But that stool will not stand by itself for any period of time. You couldn't do anything with it. It's very difficult to balance on. But if you recognize that we've got a spiritual body, now that spiritual body becomes the third leg of the stool. And we find that many of the illnesses that we have are intellectual, psychological, neurotic illnesses that cause physical problems with us. But with the physical and the intellectual, there's no way to balance that. But if we have our spirituality can help to understand that imbalance in the intellect that is creating the neurotic tendencies that is affecting our health. If we have poor health, then we can't think properly. We can't concentrate. We don't go to work. We can't meditate. But if we have a good, healthy body, now we have an opportunity to have a good, healthy thought process, and we have a good opportunity to have a good spiritual process. So we see that we have these three bodies, and this is what we call being a complete human being. Not just our physical or intellectual, but we also have our spiritual. So we work to develop that, to recognize that. So this karma is part of recognizing that spirituality and being able to learn how it is that we work with that, how we can take a negative situation and apply a positive karma, a positive action that gives us a positive result. We could take a good cause, a good situation that is rising up before us, a positive situation, but we do something negative with it. We take advantage of it. We steal from it. We do something to harm it. And now that good cause now becomes a negative. An example might be stealing the people's trust, stealing people's money. You know, they pay taxes, but somebody in the government is using, you know, ways to take the tax money and use it for their own aggrandizement, you know, and they have a bad outcome. The intention was good in the beginning, but the action was poor. So there's many examples of this. And as we go through Buddhism 101, we learn about how this all begins to work with each other. So this is karma. So we say that there's a precious human life, there's impermanence, there is the suffering of samsara, and there is karma, cause and result. And these four things are the four thoughts that turn our mind to the Dharma. These become motivations for us to learn more, to stabilize more, to practice more, to contemplate more, to take advantage of our brothers and sisters, to be able to share ideas and maybe change our mind, change our lives, open ourselves up to new ways of thinking to new ways of behaving and so on. So this is our first talk tonight. Does anybody have questions or comments that you'd like to bring up? Please turn your microphones on, come right on in, or raise your hand. Michael, you got your hand up, please.
Yeah, thank you, Lance. This is a lot for one meeting. I was wondering if we will be revisiting the four thoughts in some more detail, and the six realms, perhaps.
Yes, indeed. And we're going to, each session, we're going to recite our opening prayers, and we're going to recite the four thoughts that turn the mind to the Dharma. And then we'll be able to, one by one, be able to expound on them a little bit more. So we're going to try and focus on a few things at a time. Today was to kind of give you a lay of the land, so to speak. Does that sound okay? When I get a book, I'm thinking about buying a book, I don't necessarily open up to the middle of the book and start reading at the book and say, oh, this middle of the book looks very good, I think I'll buy it. What do I go to? I go to the table of contents, and I go to the index, and I say, well, what's listed here? Are these the things that I'm interested in? So this introduction tonight was a means of a menu, of a table of contents, of an index to say, these are some of the topics that we're going to be talking about, or this is the frame in which we're going to be talking about these things.
I'd just like to observe that for the most part, I can sustain my energy better in these 2-hour sessions, when there's more interaction. However, this was the most meaningful introductory session to me that I've experienced in terms of comprehending the territory that you laid out. I don't know whether that's because I've just heard it several times now, but I think there was more than that. I think you laid it out exceptionally well.
Well, thank you very much. But I would think that it's because you've heard it a couple of times and now it's making more sense to you. Christina, what did you think of this? Because this is the first time maybe you've heard this, or it's the first time you're with us. How did you process this?
I really enjoyed it. I would agree that it was laid out nicely. I felt like you were giving just kind of an introductory of what we're going to be discussing as the course breaks down. This is all new to me, so I really look forward to the class and going through the process. And I think it's going to be wonderful. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Louisa, what did you think about this? I know that you've been a practitioner for many years and studied Buddhism over the years, but this is the first time you've joined us for Buddhism 101. What did you think about this?
Right. I feel like you laid out a map for us that we're going to be following, a path. On this map, there are many little stations that we'll get off and visit and discuss. All leading, I guess you could say, all leading to Oz, all leading to enlightenment or understanding of enlightenment and what it's going to take for each of us to get on that path. So I look at it more like a map where we'll stop along the way and see things and better understand things.
Very good. Thank you. Jean, did you have any comments that you wanted to make? Jean, did you hear me?
Jean?
I think I'm kind of overwhelmed by the amount. of the territory we covered.
Okay.
I perhaps as we revisit some of these things, they'll become clearer to me.
Okay, good. That's a fair thing. And I know it is an awful lot, but at the same time, we've got a limited amount of time. So I think it's important to be able to cover, enough ground to grow on, and not to make it too simple and lose the challenge. Soho, have you been with us from the beginning part? What did you think about this?
No, this is my first time.
Yes.
I think when I joined, I missed the first few sessions.
Okay.
Yeah,
Did
but
you-
I did remember you talk about the karma and some samara.
Mhm.
Yeah, but then I understand a bit better now.
Okay, very good. Thank
It's
you.
good to revisit again, kind of like
Beg pardon?
it's good to revisit some of
Yes.
the yeah.
Yes. Would anybody else like to say something? Any suggestions?
Yes.
Yes, Tom.
From my experience, your presentation is consistent with most presentations in the use of the word suffering. But there are people out there, scholars, who think that dukkha has a meaning other than suffering. And one of those meanings is expectation. So the expectation is the distortion of reality as it is. It's our projection out there. And when our projection is not met, then the common answer is that we suffer. But there are other interpretations. So one thing that I would like to see, if it's possible, is that when there are alternative explanations, that they at least be acknowledged. They don't have to be agreed with. But what I'm saying about the dukkha not necessarily being translated as suffering is not just an assertion of my own. It's based on what some scholars have asserted. Have you heard something similar to that?
Well, I've heard dukkha referred to many different times, and it does have several different meanings to it. But yeah, that's generally, I think that's the idea, that tonight was an introduction, and then as we move forward with this, I'd like to encourage more group discussion of whatever particular topic we might be talking about for that evening. So tonight I was trying to focus on enlightenment and the four thoughts that turn the mind to the Dharma, why it is that we're here. Those were the two things that I was trying to focus on. So each night, that we do this, to have another topic like that we can focus on.
Oh, you
If somebody
covered
has
that.
a suggestion, that's great.
No, for what you want to do, you did good.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, so I'm trying to encourage more group discussion, less of a lecture, but to be able to frame the topic, talk about it, and then to get to hear ourselves speak about it and get to hear what each other says about it, because there's many different ways in which these things can be expressed and so on. So I think it's important to have a discussion group like this. Who is ringing the bell there? So, all right. Katie, did you have anything that you wanted to add to this? That was a no? No, we don't hear you. It seems like your microphone is off, but on rather, but we're not hearing you. Okay. All right. Tom, how about you? Will you make a comment?
Yes, it was a great outline that you started this session with. Go through these 8-week sessions of Buddhism 101, and it was a very awakening outline that with the 4 thoughts that turn the mind. And I love the comment that you made that really stuck out, that we all think that we're really permanent. That's why we go through our dissatisfaction in our lives, because well, we'll do it later. We'll put it off to later. I can do it later. You know, we tend to be procrastinating all the time because we think we are permanent. That we'll be here tomorrow. We'll be here next year. There's a lot of points that you made in this first session that was very profound. I mean, just listen to the words, you know, just even if you listen to this session again, there's a lot to learn. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you. William, Bhavani, do you have any comment? I know you know this, you've heard this several times and been longtime practitioners in spirituality. What do you think about the group discussion idea, to be able to have more discussion in our talks on Monday nights?
The main thing that I have found in going with the classes in this is that you have to actually do the work and you have to practice. That's about all I've got to say on it. It was a very good introduction. Very good introduction. Just remember, do the work and practice, practice, practice.
Yes.
Yeah, I always appreciate hearing you give the teachings again and again, Lance. They're good reminders. We forget things, our minds take us to strange places sometimes, and it's good to get pulled back in again. So thank you.
All right, thank you. Zara, would you like to make a comment?
I don't have anything to offer that other people haven't already contributed. I'm thankful to be here with you, Lance.
Well, thank you. What do you think about, group discussion? Do you think
I think that's a good question. I think there's benefit just because I teach, I teach students and stuff. There's great benefit in these groups because one person's question may help another person who's thinking the same thing. So learning incidentally through other people's willingness to pose the question, I think is hugely beneficial, especially in this forum where there may be some people may have fear or anxiety to appear silly with a question. So I think it's nice. I think there's collateral benefit in hearing other people's questions that may spark other organic conversation. I appreciate it.
Okay, good. Thanks. And Curtis, how about you? Your microphone's off.
The big idea about the nature of human life, that there's this sense of being able to become enlightened. It's a big idea. Once you grasp it, it orients your value system to what's really important and away from worldly concerns, like getting another car, or a bigger car. The second, the four thoughts to turn the mind, intellectually, it's important to go through it intellectually, but when you start to feel it in your gut, your mortality, or the imperative to cut out the things that aren't worth spending time on, you start to live and move towards the ideal of enlightenment. It becomes active instead of just an abstract idea. So it's fundamental to motivation, that there is something that's, it takes some ability to imagine that. The teachings help you to imagine that and to imagine why you need to get going with it. Reflecting on that as you've done tonight is foundational. And, you always go back to those fundamentals, because otherwise you start to get caught up in, the forgetful state of things where you're worried about the car and getting a new car rather than what's really important.
Very good. Thank you very much. So thank you all very much for participating and bringing up your comments and everything. And I look forward to next week. When we do these teachings, any practices that we do, any studies that we do, are always done in three parts. The first part is the motivation part, where we recite the opening prayers to set our intention, why we are doing this, which is for the benefit of other beings. We're not selfishly holding on to it. We're trying to overcome the ego. So we overcome the ego through our generosity of giving and doing for others. So that's paramount in our view of spirituality and Buddhism in particular. The second part is the body of the work that we did. So in this case, maybe it was like this discussion on the four thoughts that turn the mind and the definition of enlightenment and so on. So that's the main part, which is the largest part. The next part is the final part. It's called the dedication. So now, whatever merit, whatever we have learned, whatever wisdom we have gained, whatever skillful means that we have developed from hearing this and thinking about this, now we are taking that merit, which is like money in the bank. We are taking that merit and we are dedicating it to the benefit of other beings, to their enlightenment, that our whatever work that we have done now as merit, now is being given to them, that is being dedicated to them. So this is a very, very important part of any practice, any study that we do, independent study, any teaching like this, we always do. So I'm explaining this so that you understand why we do things. So remember, it's the what, the why, and the how. So we'll keep coming back to that frame. So now we do our dedication prayers. So in our book here, so we'll do we'll do the Dharma prayer on page 20. And on page 20 and 21, we'll do the dedication prayer by Lord Jigdan Sumgun. Jigdan Sumgun is the founder of our lineage, of our Buddhist lineage, the lineage that we follow, which is over 800 years old. So these two prayers really consolidate so much of what it is that we have talked about tonight and will continue to talk about. We'll consolidate this as a dedication for other beings. So please recite along with me out loud. It's important to do these things out loud to generate vibration in our body. This is how we connect. So we begin on page 20 with the Dharma prayer. by the virtues collected in the three times, by myself and all beings in samsara and nirvana, and by the innate word of virtue, may I and all sentient beings quickly attain unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious enlightenment. May the teachings of the great Trikumpa Ratna Shri, who is omniscient, Lord of the Dharma, master of interdependence, continue and increase through study, practice, contemplation, and meditation until the end of samsara. Glorious, holy, venerable, precious, kind root and lineage lamas, divine assembly of yidams and assemblies of Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, yogins, yoginis, and dakinis dwelling in the 10 directions, please hear my prayer. May the virtues collected in the three times by myself and all beings in samsara and nirvana and the innate word of virtue not result in the 8 worldly concerns, the 4 causes of samsara, or rebirth as a Shravaka or Pratyeka Buddha. May all mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me and mine, obstructors who harm, misleading Mars and the hordes of demons, experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly attain unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. By the power of this vast root of virtue, may I benefit all beings through my body, speech, and mind. May the afflictions of desire, hatred, ignorance, arrogance, and jealousy not arise in my mind. May attachment to fame, reputation, wealth, honor, and concern for this life not arise for even a moment. May my mind stream be moistened by loving kindness, compassion, and bodhichitta, and through that may I become a spiritual master with good qualities equal to the infinity of space. May I gain the supreme attainment of Mahamudra in this very life. May the torment of suffering not arise even at the time of my death. May I not die with negative thoughts. May I not die confused by wrong view. May I not experience an untimely death. May I die joyfully and happily in the great luminosity of the mind as such and the pervading clarity of Dharmata. May I, in any case, gain the supreme attainment of Mahamudra in this very life. May I gain the supreme attainment of Mahamudra at the time of death or in the bardo. Om, Ah, Hom. Om, Ah, Hom. Om, Ah, Hom. May my body, speech, and mind become inseparable with the body, speech, and mind of all the enlightened ones for the benefit of all beings. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Lance.
What does it take to get the, do you all get the transcript if you want it? You can print that?
What you do is I open it up, and then at the end it says, it's got a little window down there when you have to view full transcript. And then there's a little bar down there that says save transcript. And you save it, and it automatically puts it into a file, a folder in your computer, in your computer you're looking at under Zoom. You can click another thing that says show in folder, and it will show where it is in your computer after you saved it.
Okay. All right. Well, yeah, I saw it last time and put it in my folder. What about you? Can you save it in your folder?
Well, it saves it to a Zoom folder, and then if you want to, you could just move it, copy it, or cut and paste it to the folder of your choice.
Okay. Well, thank you. And we do record these sessions, and they are on YouTube. So we have a YouTube channel for all these things. So if you're interested, I can send you the link for that. So thank you all very much. I look forward to seeing you all next week. If there's any questions or comments and you want to forward a email to me, I'll be more than happy to to respond, and look forward to seeing you next week.
Have a good week, Lance.
Okay,
Thanks,
thank
Lance.
you. Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.